And when I say that name, I want you to repeat it with me, all right? Can I hear it? George, Paul, Ringo, and John. We love you, Beatles. Oh, yes, we do. We don't love anyone as much as you. And you're not near us. We're blue. Oh, Beatles, we love you. Let's try George. We love you, George. Oh, yes, we do.
And I noticed this man standing 5 feet in front of me, and all these people were gathering around and having their pictures taken with him, and I was wondering who he was. And then he turned around, and it was George, and I almost had a cardiac arrest. But I didn't want to make a big scene because I know George doesn't like that.
Let's try Paul. We love you, Paul. Yes, we do. We don't love anyone as much as you.
I like them all, but I guess Paul, because he's talented, really cute.
Let's try Ringo. We love you, Ringo. Oh, yes, we do.
And he really treats his fans well. He kind of say, well, why are you being so shy about all this? And, you know, why are you hiding?
And we said we were afraid that he'd get angry. And he just laughed, and he shook our hands at 6:15 p.m.
Exactly.
Now shout this one out. John! Oh, yes, we do. We don't love anyone as much as you.
John. Always, forever, John. My favorite.
We're blue. Oh, John, now all the Beatles. We love you, Beatles. Oh, yes, we do. Scream it out. As much as louder.
There were pop fans before the Beatles, and there have been plenty since, but never quite like this.
Some of them waited all night, and were they wet. The scene at Sydney Airport as Beatle fans braved
From 1963, when they burst upon the world, until 1966, when they stopped touring, the Beatles were greeted at airports and concerts with one continuous scream.
Then onto an open lorry for the drive past, just trying to stay on their feet, soaking up the rain and the adulation.
A formal occasion at Buckingham Palace, not even Victory Day or the coronation produced such a scene of frenzied acclaim. Oh well, now back to mundane affairs, Rhodesia and all that jazz.
The Empress, some of you may recognize as having been on the sleeve of Sentimental Journey. Recognize it? Good. True fans today. Ringo was born in Madryn Street, at number 9 Madryn Street.
There's never been anyone like them.
Yeah,
no one
can
had that influence on them.
They've all got their good personalities as well, and they're all from Liverpool, and it's just good being in Liverpool.
We will get off in a moment, so you can go and take your pictures there if you wish.
Cheers, thanks a lot.
When he was about 3, his father left the family, and his mother had to move to a smaller house. The house they'd been in was 3 rooms upstairs, 3 rooms downstairs, for which they were paying 14 shillings and 10p per week. When the father left, they couldn't afford this amount, so she had to move to a smaller house, 2 rooms upstairs and 2 rooms downstairs, which is just in this little grove here, Admiral Grove, number 10. And that was 10 shillings a week. And there she lived, and there the family lived, and they were living there when Ringo and the Beatles made the charts. So you can imagine the crowds coming round here.
The Cavern Club, where the Beatles played 292 times, is now just builders' rubble.
And that is the entrance to these warehouses. And if we go through that entrance in our imagination, we arrive at the top of the stone steps which lead down.
Yeah.
And then turn left into the first tunnel.
Okay.
Now, when people passed by in this street and they saw this opening, it was very forbidding, and to them it was like the black hole of Calcutta. And of course these strange sounds were coming up from the bowels of the earth. It all mystified them. I'm talking about the business types with their rolled umbrellas and their Homburgs and their pinstripes. It's all here. It's locked in these bricks. We're seeing some history here, because I know you never went to the cavern when it was the Beatles scene, but this is where the steps were. In fact, we're hoping to find some of the actual steps that led right down into the tunnel. It looks as though they're all buried with so many memories as well. Do you wish you'd been there? I bet you do.
I mean, you'd walk into the door and you would feel this smell, this awful, awful smell of sort of Dettol and Vim and dirty old cellar. But you knew by the end of it that that was going to be the most marvellous smell in the world.
I remember I was at school at the time, and June used to meet me in her lunchtime. And to hide the school blouse and the tie, I had this black polo neck collar, just a collar, not a sweat, and I used to put it on over, you know, with the duffel coat over, and that way you couldn't detect, you know, the school tie and the blouse. Yeah. And
there was a very intimate relationship in Liverpool between the Beatles and their fans. The Beatles fans could actually ring the Beatles. I mean, you just had to look under Mac in the phone book and ring Paul McCartney and say, please, will you play Some Other Guy for us at the Cavern on Friday?
A taste of honey, tasting much sweeter than wine. Dream of your first kiss, and then I feel upon my lips again. A taste of honey, tasting much sweeter.
queued out from 8 o'clock in the morning. But at the time, my father was quite strict with us and we couldn't wear makeup. So we went down to Exchange Station, put all the makeup on, and then queuing out like half the day. The makeup was absolutely ruined by the time the cavern opened. And they were due on stage about 5:30, and Gina will take us off.
Yeah, well, we eventually got inside the cavern, right by the stage. Then I suddenly felt rather lightheaded, and I just knew I was going to pass out, so I just got handed from the front to the back. And I can barely remember people in my head saying, "Who's she with? Who's she with?"
Well, I was standing there and I saw her out the corner of my eye flake out, and I thought, well, the situation's either I go outside with, I'm going to miss them, and I didn't really see the point of the two of us missing them, so I thought, whereas if I see them, I can tell her later on what happens. So people were saying, who's she with, and I was just standing there. Anyway, I saw them, and I managed to get outside about an hour later, and she was sitting, she was not too pleased, you know, sitting on the steps outside.
So I woke up outside the cabin wondering where it was.
And the girls who sat on the front, no, the second row of that, would wait until the group before the Beatles came on, with the rollers in, all this time, hours and hours through. And as soon as they knew the Beatles were about to go on, all the rollers would come out and all the backgammon would start. And just so they'd be absolutely perfect for the Beatles.
Let's pretend it's 1962. So let's do the Cavern Stomp.
I'll give you all I've got to give, baby, say you love me too. I may not ever like to give, but what I got, I'll give to you. I don't care too much, so money can't buy me love.
Oh, it's great.
Did you ever hear back home look like this? Like we going to?
Definitely.
Well, I can remember going to the tower, and the Beatles were there, and they were quite tatty. And Paul McCartney had a big rip in his trousers. I remember saying to the girl, was it you who said to? The girl next to me. Oh, I said, I'd love to sew your trousers for you.
You were the one with the rip, well, you know, I wasn't.
And he said, thanks, I'll sew my own trousers.
Find me love, everybody tells me so. If I me love, no, I say you don't need no tambourine, and I'll be satisfied. Yes, I'm in as you want the kind of things, the blood you just can't buy. I don't care too much
When they announced in the cavern that Please Please Me was #1, Bob Wooley came out, and I think they expected everybody to cheer and be really pleased about it, and instead there was silence for quite a few minutes, because it was then that everyone realised that that was it, they were going to go away.
When that hit #1, we'd realised, and the fans did, what they'd done, you see. They'd made them hit paraders, and they knew that the writing was on the wall for them.
The fans bought half the tickets by post, and then 5,000 queued, some of them for 2 nights, in hope of obtaining the rest. Here are some of the lucky 2,500 who really are going to see the Beatles.
You felt as if you owned the Beatles. You know, they were your life, and if you did happen to have a boyfriend, it was only because he looked like one of the Beatles.
Paul McCartney gets the full treatment, the kind the fans have taught him to expect.
Oh, look. Oh, their autograph. Do you remember how we used to get their autographs?
Yeah, I do.
How did we?
We just used to throw their autograph book up on stage.
And how did we get them back?
Go and collect them the next day. Don't you remember when I went back the next day?
Oh, we used to nick anyone's.
Plus that, as we took them out about another half a dozen.
Yes.
What's that?
I used this eyeshadow to write on their car with at Charing Cross.
When we got to Hammersmith, there was all camping out, and we thought we was going to be first there.
It would be lined up 6 hours in the pouring rain.
Oh, I know, and it hailstormed. Do you remember when I got hold of that policeman? I got my ticket, and I waved it back. I said, "You don't realise, I've got a ticket to see them." The whole place just roared out with chanting of the Beatles, and
You
either
couldn't
wanted Paul
you couldn't
or
really hear the
John or-
Beatles because everyone was singing along with them. That, you know, you just couldn't hear them. But it was just a thought that they was on stage, and we was actually there.
When my mum got up that morning as well to get us up.
My mum didn't even know I was going. I never told her.
Because you slept with me, didn't you, that night? My mum kicked us both out of bed and we left the house, I think, laden with a flask probably and jelly babies and things that the Beatles used to like.
You know, when you get the compere saying, you want to sing? I bet you don't really. And he'd really build you up, and by then everybody was screaming and singing for them. You couldn't really hear their names, you know, sort of saying that we were going to be on next because of the screams, and they really built you up to such an extent that, and then when the curtains opened, I mean, it was 90% of the girls were crying.
Oh, yeah, all the black running down the eyes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And the atmosphere was just absolutely fantastic.
We came out of the Odeon and...
We just said, we've got to get backstage, I've got to touch Paul McCartney,
So we tried to go on the fire escape. We got halfway up, didn't we? And all of a sudden, the policeman with his speak over, you girls come down, or I'll step the dogs on to you.
They were sitting on stools behind a bar, and the fans had to file pass on the other side. And we'd been told that we could just talk to them, but we mustn't touch them or ask for their autographs because they wouldn't be able to sign everybody's autograph. So when it actually got nearer to my turn, I suddenly felt this awful panic come over me, and I thought, oh, I can't meet them, you know. And I said to my friend, you go first. So she said, oh, no, I'm not going first, you go first. And she pushed me, and I come face to face with John Lennon. And I couldn't believe that there he was in real life, you know, after seeing him on telly and having him all over my bedroom wall. There he was standing there in real life. And my mind couldn't take it. I just passed straight out onto the floor. And my friend told me later that he looked over the bar and said, oh, where's she gone? You know. And then my next recollection was being picked up, was being taken away by the St John's ambulance. And I remember thinking, oh, I've lost my chance, you know, my chance has gone to meet the Beatles. And I sort of struggled to my feet. And I said, I'm all right, you know. And I went back to where the Beatles were. And John Lennon said to me, are you all right? So I said, yes, I'm all right, you know. And I went to walk away because just seeing him was enough, you know. And all of a sudden somebody touched me on the arm and I looked up and it was George Harrison. And he said to me, are you all right? Well, George Harrison was my idol. He was the one I'd come to see. But, you know, I'd just forgotten all about him. And when I saw him there, I said, oh, George. And I held my arms out to him. He looked a bit bewildered, you know. I think I frightened him. I don't know whether he thought I was going to jump over the bar or what. But he sort of held back a bit. And when I realised I wasn't going to be able to get hold of him, he had his hands on the bar, and I just got hold of his hand and kissed his hand. And I thought, I'm not going to let you go now. And I just held on to his hand. And then I was gradually led away by the officials, you know, and I was sobbing and my friend was sobbing, and everybody who'd met the Beatles, they were all sobbing, all the girls were all sobbing.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog. It's been a hard day's night, I should be sleeping like a log. But when I get home to you, I find the things that you do will make me feel.
We used to sit there and we used to say all the words. We knew it off by heart.
When we were filming A Hard Day's Night, it was during a school holiday. I think it was around Easter time in 1964, and all the youngsters were out of school. And since much of that movie was filmed on the streets of London, we had to put a decoy crew on one street and film maybe half mile away before they caught us. The last 10 minutes of the movie, we were recreating a Beatles television show, and we wanted a live audience of Beatle fans. So the union allowed us to go after fans of the age we wanted. We paid them the going rates. We gave them lunch, sandwiches, and milk. And there was no problem in filling up the theater at all. They were there. And it was marvelous because we didn't have to tell them to scream. They screamed on their own. In London and in Liverpool, where there were premieres, the fans were screaming, but not during the film, not while it was being run. In New York and California, where I went to see the movie, It was pure madness. They were uncontrollable. The little girls were running up and touching the screen and crying out for their favorite Beatle.
You know you should be.
I mean, America's like the rest of the world times 10. They just went potty, just insane about the Beatles. But I noticed it more when I was there, obviously, that when we would go in and out of a hotel, it would be like a big security exercise. It wasn't just, hey, look, it's the Beatles arriving. It would be, let's grab a piece of them, let's pull their legs apart like drumsticks.
Close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. Remember, I'll always be true. And then while I'm away, I'll ride home every day, and I'll send all my love to you. I'll pretend that I'm missing the lips I'm missing.
New Yorkers turned out in force, and making allowance for an American accent, the screams might have been genuine Merseyside. George, John, Paul, and Ringo had found a new world to conquer.
Went right down to the record store and bought 2 copies of Meet the Beatles, which was their first album, so we could play one side right after the other without having to turn them over, and listen to the records day and night in between studying, trying to study.
I think we were the first ones on campus with this first Beatles record, and we would actually play it in concert form to standing room only in our dormitory room. Got a little crowded in there, but it was worth it. It was great music.
Why does it excite you so much? We don't know, really. Okay, you form another group and be managers.
Well, we're an all-girls school, so I can assure you that these 4 fellows created quite an impression on the 800 girls housed therein.
What about all this talk that you represent some kind of a social rebellion? It's a dirty lie.
I was sitting in his apartment listening to the radio, which was full of the Beatles' arrival, minute by minute breakdown of what was happening, and I thought, well, I have nothing else to do here. I think I'll go out to the airport and see the Beatles. So I got onto an airport bus. It didn't seem to me a big enough deal for me to hop in a taxi. Went out to the airport, and when I got there, I saw thousands and thousands of people waiting outside, and I knew that there were certainly thousands and thousands more inside. So I turned right around and hopped in the first taxi I saw and said, please take me back to Manhattan. As we were driving back, he said, were you out there to see the Beatles? I said, indeed I was. And he said, did you see them? And I said, no, there were far too many people there. He said, well, would you like to see them? And I said, oh, yes, I would. And he said, well, look around. And I looked out that window of the taxi, and there were 4 limousines, 4 big black limousines, and in each one, a Beatle. And the police were moving people off the road so that the Beatles could have a clear path back into the city, and my taxi driver insinuated himself between 2 of the limousines, and there was no way they could get him off the road. And as we arrived back at the city, he said, now when we come to a stoplight, I'll go by them very slowly, and you tell me which one you want me to stop next to. So as soon as we got off the highway, the first red light we came to, they all stopped, and he started the back and went by very slowly, and I looked in, and I think it was the second from the front was George Harrison, and George Harrison had been the one that I had picked for myself. So we stopped opposite him, and I rolled down the window, and somebody in George's limousine rolled down the window, and I leaned out and I said, how does one go about saying hello to a Beatle? And George Harrison gave me a big smile. This is why one says hello.
With pandemonium here. They had barricades all along here, on both sides here, and all around over here. Maybe 5,000 to 6,000 kids. And whenever the Beatles came out, the noise was tremendous.
We set forth as a military campaign, basically, not as great as World War II, but it was a very serious matter.
at that point to make certain that, number one, that the Great Plaza's name was protected. We coordinated very closely with the New York City Police Department, who are experts at mob control and all the rest of it.
Beatle record at home. Every Beatle record. We didn't get to see it. What kind of police protection? I didn't like to get a piece of the Beatles.
We suddenly realized that this was sort of touching everyone's household, that we were starting to get calls from extremely prominent people in America, grandmothers and grandfathers and mothers and fathers. Could you get me an autographed picture from my little granddaughter or my child?
Yes, I touched Paul. You did? Yes, I went up to him and touched him. What did he say to you? Oh, nothing. I just said, take my hand, and he put his hand in mine. I took it.
And we were just standing there with all the other hundreds and hundreds of girls and guys, and we were just looking up towards the windows to see if they, were looking out. And to this day, I don't know if they did or they didn't, but we would swear at that time that they did.
But what we didn't realize is that America was experiencing an entirely new phenomena, whereas it had grown in this country. It had slowly dawned on us, and it hadn't happened quite as explosively here as it did there.
This is crazy, but this is just a sign of time people are nuts, and they're all right, but that will last for 3 or 4 months. But the boys will make millions.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something. I think you'll understand when I say that something. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand.
Ed Sullivan, in all of his famous comments, said, quiet, you promised you'd be quiet. But it was impossible to be quiet, because there they were and there we were, and it was just so terrific. We just could not control ourselves. It was one of these things that probably group hysteria.
The ratings the next morning, I think 60% of the nation watched them. It was the lowest crime rate among juvenile delinquency in the United States. The crime rate was 0. I mean, there were comments made like, well, everyone, no one robbed the hubcaps in New York City that night.
But finally, when they did perform, we really didn't know what song they were performing.
No, you couldn't hear a thing.
We'd gone thinking we were going to hear a concert. And as it turned out, we just saw them mouthing words on the screen. And of course, I suppose the sound was piped out to the TV audience. But we never were too sure what they performed that evening.
When we came out, all our parents were standing like in the circles, waiting to retrieve their kids. And the other kids who couldn't get into the show were there trying to pull us apart just because we were in the theater seeing them.
It was just like a once-in-a-lifetime feeling that you got that there was something special was happening that night, and it was proven by our ratings. I mean, it was the greatest $3,000 investment in the history of television.
Well, after that experience, it seemed sure to us that we just had to meet the Beatles. I think we felt destined. After all, there were all these girls who were very interested in meeting the Beatles, but by golly, if we were 21 years old, we were seniors at the university, we were about to receive our degrees, and we were going to find a way. That's it.
And we had heard, was it Murray the K, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
One day on the radio saying the Beatles were going to Washington for a concert. And coming back the next day for a certain time. And in those days, it was before the shuttle, so we called the airlines and narrowed down as to what plane they would have to be taking back from Washington to New York.
And sure enough, we found out we couldn't get on their plane going back, but we could make a reservation on the plane from Washington back to New York, at which point we decided a road trip was in order to Washington. So we were off, scot-free, on our way to Washington in the teeth of a raging gale. It was a terrible snowstorm in February. So we drove, I'd say, 8 hours, and finally arrived in Washington about midnight or later. So the next morning, off we went to the airport. We were going to check in, of course, in plenty of time, and we arrived, got to the check-in counter, and the airline fellow said, well, girls, the Beatles were going to be on this flight. We said, we're going to be on the flight. We thought they were on this flight. So sorry, they've just called in and canceled the reservations. Well, that almost undid us. But of course, we were in a tight jam. We had to make a quick decision, and we decided we'd head off to Union Station.
Yeah, we took a cab, I think.
Did we ever? Across town,
telling the cab driver.
Life or death. We arrived at Union Station. There was not a soul to be seen. There was not a member of the press. There was not one screaming girl. There was not anything that even resembled a Beatle. So we went out to the track, and of course the psst, psst, psst of the steam was going up. Nobody in sight. We hopped on the train, and of course we're somewhat in a state of depression because we felt that we had really missed our big chance. The Beatles were nowhere to be seen.
We went to the club car and saw a British gentleman who we were hoping had something to do with the Beatles, and
suddenly the trail
buying
warmed
lots
up.
of hamburgers.
And that's it. So that was really our clue, that maybe the trail was not as cold as we had been afraid, but maybe we really were onto something big, really big, although we couldn't figure out quite where these Beatles were. So I think we decided that we had to catch their attention in some very important way. So we set to work writing an epic poem, right? Which was a little bit more like a limerick, but I think we
on a
thought of
napkin
it.
that we had gotten from the club
That's
car.
it. But our tale is long and sad but true. How far we've come to be with you. All night we traveled in the car. 400 miles is not so far when where we're going is where you are. We're college girls and 21. Who ever heard of so much fun? Well, this thing went on and on and on, and we handed this to this fellow, and he in turn took it back to this very private car at the end of the train, as it turned out.
Said he'd see what he could do for us.
And came back and said, "All right, girls, come with me. You're in." And not knowing quite what to expect, at last we were going to come to the end of this quest. It was wonderful. And we walked in. Of course, we were somewhat at a loss for words after all this, but the flash bulbs all started going off, which, of course, took us back a little bit. And there, sure enough, are the Beatles, with, I guess, an appetite for hamburgers. And so we met them and we spoke with them, and they were most gracious. I mean, there was some antics and clowning and so on going on. I especially remember Paul being very gentlemanly.
He was nice. He was the nicest to us.
Yeah, and I think Ringo and George, as I say, were sort of acting up together. And I don't know if we understood everything they were saying, but they were having a good time. And I don't quite know what we were expected to do exactly. But in any case, I think we were extremely ladylike, probably a little too ladylike. And out we went, at which point we fell to the floor and rolled in the aisles of the train, chortling with glee and laughter, because we had really...
We had done it.
We'd done it. That was it. That's all we needed to do.
And we hadn't actually seen the stadium, the outside of the stadium, except from a great distance. And to suddenly come up from a tunnel in the middle of this field and see 56,000 screaming kids, and when I say screaming, it was impossible.
And then they'd go on, you'd suddenly hear, wah! Couldn't hear the music at all. Just let me hear some of that wah!
Baby's good to me, you know she's happy as can be, you know she's in love.
Very loud screaming and cheering and applauding, and the music. I felt rather glad I was outside rather than in here.
I don't know how they hear the music. I thought that once they got started playing that it would all end, but they screamed through the whole performance. I don't know how they even enjoyed the music. It was just a constant roar.
As Lennon said afterwards, he never knew whether he was in tune, whether his guitar was in tune, what he was singing. There was no way they could hear themselves. There's no way we could hear them. It was just the rhythm of Ringo's drums. That was about it. The most frightening instance of Beatlemania that I ever saw, and I think that they would agree to this day was the most frightening, was when they arrived, we all arrived on a chartered Lockheed Electra that was used for their first tour in Dallas, Texas. And the security people had not anticipated anything like what was going to happen. They didn't have nearly enough police to hold the fans back. And although in most towns the aircraft was taken to a distant part of the airport and they were rushed away as soon as the plane was on the ground, it stopped. But in this case, the plane was brought reasonably close to the building, and the fans broke through the cordons, and I'm talking about 10,000 fans around this plane. On it, we could see them with lighted cigarettes sitting on the wings, waving at the Beatles through the portholes. And that was absolutely terrifying because there was nothing the pilot could do. It was a propeller plane. If he started up the plane, the engines, it would have sliced dozens of them to death. And they just had to wait until a laundry van could be brought out and finally squeeze through the fans under the plane, and they were dropped through the service hatch.
Suddenly, one policeman sneezed around the barrier, because there's like a policeman every few hundred yards, and one of them went, and leaned down to blow his nose, and a fan drifted past him and onto the green. And of course he ran after it and left a hole. And all the fans from all the way around the pitch ran out through this security hole towards where we were. And I was saying, hey, it's really great here, and listen to this. And suddenly I saw this, it looked like a mass of bees ready for the attack. They were coming towards us, a great cloud of fans. And we thought, we're going to die now, because there were about 8 million of them, and there was only about 17 of us. So they stopped playing, they threw their guitars down, raced off the stage into the caravan, and we were all locked the doors, and suddenly we could hear. Suddenly the whole caravan, arms and legs coming through the windows. And fortunately, they brought out the flamethrowers and the atomic rifles, and we were saved, but it was just quite a heinous experience, darling.
Let me see, get this up here. That's it. Wow. This is the famous guitar. This is the most valuable guitar in the world. It's the only guitar in the world that's autographed by all the Beatles. It was autographed for me in 1964, 18 years ago. That's when the Beatles invaded America. Oh, by the way, this is George, where he signed his name, and this is Paul over here. Now, I have this covered, though, with some plastic, so you'll have to excuse it right now. And that's John. He was the dearest one of them all. In fact, see how I'm affected already? Excuse me, please, won't you? And Ringo, here's where, that's Ringo down there. I don't know why I act this way. So, if you want to look and see a guitar, kids, you're looking at a guitar that's very valuable. In fact, it's valued over $50,000. You see? Beautiful. That's what it is, you see? It's great. Now, would you like to just hold it? For example, just hold it yourself. And you can really say that you held something that the Beatles actually held in their own hand. This is as close as you'll ever get to anything the holding that's the Beatles. You see what I mean? Wow. I've even had them faint just touching the guitar. And not only that, but even touching my wife, because when they see the picture of her with Paul McCartney, they touch them and they just pass out. Now, but I got to get my family together now. I will show you my family. I've got them right in here. Yes, sirree. And the whole world knows this family. Look at those look at those little babies. Isn't that something? Yes. Anybody I ever asked to pose with my guitar, they done it graciously. I've got 4 Miss Americas. I got 2 Miss USAs. I've got, oh gosh, everybody should know this name, Gene Roddenberry of Star Trek fame. And most of all, gosh, Roy Rogers. Could you move over to this side, over this way, a little more. Okay, here we go. Now smile. Ready? Now that's it like that. There you are. Come on, just one more time. That's the way to do it. Actually, I'm hoping to use this guitar as a beacon or a catalyst to organize all the Beatle fans in the world, or in America anyway, and I'm going to ask them to go ahead and send me a contribution to a charity fund I'm going to start for John Lennon. Now, the purpose of it is to use it for the benefit of one of our children's hospitals here in Norfolk. I have that. I feel I'm destined to do it, and that's the reason what's driving me on it.
Who'll give me $75 for all four? The complete set. Only one person? 75, I'll take it. Will anyone bid for him individually, one at a time? Yes? Yes? All right, we're going to do it one at a time. We'll start with Paul. There's Paul. Who'll give me $15 for Paul? 15, 16, 17, 18, now 19, 20, 21, now you got 22, now over you go 23, where? $23 over, you got 24, where? 24 I got, now you go 5, 5, 5, 24, 25, now you got 26. 26, now you got 27, 27, now you got 28. 27, you got 28.
As far as something that's going to keep increasing in value, you're probably best off getting memorabilia, because that seems to be the rage as far as what's increasing in value. Every single convention, it's double what it was last time.
Well, the record player is from 1964. It's one of the more rare of the memorabilia type items, like the dolls and the toys and the whatnot. I have one in my collection, and I recently bought another Beatle collection that included one, so I have one for sale.
40, 40, 40, 40, 40, all done. $39 once. 30, 40 I got over here, now you go 41.
You know, I'd go down to the drugstore and I'd say, if I buy all 50 of them, can I have the box too? And they'd go, okay, but $250 was my whole month's allowance, but I do it month after month, going and getting the bubblegum boxes, because I just thought they were so neat, and being able to have the whole set.
Some stuff people try and pass off as being real. And they'll say, this is definitely Beatle memorabilia, and you should buy this. Like this item, these little cake decorations, they're called the Go-Go Swingers. And because there's a left-handed guitarist, they say it's the Beatles. Well, it isn't. It's just cake decorations. You can still buy them. In fact, I did buy these for $2. And I've seen them at Beatle Fest, sometimes in the box they originally came in, which big deal. So you have the box cake decorations came in, but they'll try and sell them for $50 to $100.
$42 once, $42 twice. How many do you want for $42 each? How many do you want? You want to come up there and look at them? Okay. He's going to come and look at them. Meanwhile, you should decide how many you want at $42 each.
Yeah, here they are. Bring them down. Let's bring them down here so that
stands aren't included.
There are more of those. There's Sgt. Pepper outfits, and there are also the gray satin suits with the collarless jackets. By the same, made by the same one.
Really?
Yeah.
1971. I was waiting for some of the Beatles to come out of Apple. It was at the nighttime. And while I was waiting, I noticed that the garbage cans were outside and filled. So to pass the time, I went through the garbage cans for souvenirs, and I came up with some unique ones. There was a letter from one of London's biggest department stores saying that the Beatles' credit was no longer any good because they still owed several £1,000s for some carpeting. But the letter went on to say that if each individual Beatle were to come in, their credit would be good, but not the name of the Beatles. So I have that as on the original department store stationery, and it's quite a unique souvenir.
I've been aware of the Beatles since the breakup. That's when I really started getting into them. So I was, that's about the time I really started. But I started meeting them in '74, December. I think I've seen all of them in a matter of 3 weeks in New York. George was doing a concert there. He was at the Palazzo Hotel, and he was hanging out with John. So we snuck into the hotel, and we hit 2 security men when George was coming out, because George didn't want to get subpoenaed with a subpoena to appear in court. So John was saying, cut it out, leave us alone. He'd take his son Julian, grab him. We'd try to get the pictures. George would say, cut it out now. He would run down the street. There was one time where his limousine went up the wrong way to the street, against the traffic, to get away from us. We stood right behind him, got upstairs. The cops stopped the car. He got out of the car. We ran with him. And when he got in the hotel, he signed autographs. He said, "You guys are crazy."
After a while, the Liverpool accent sort of just grows on you, you know. And George Harrison has a way of dragging his words, you know. And it becomes like a part of you after a while. And sometimes it's really all a big fantasy.
I'm a big Beatles fan, always have been. It always seems that a lot of my life has paralleled John Lennon's. A lot of his albums, where his head was at, that's where my head was at the time. It just seemed to happen that way. And matter of fact, I have a twin brother who looks same as me. His hair is a little shorter, but he's won John Lennon lookalike contests in New York, and I've won them out here in California. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Remember to let it into your heart.
In a phrase, I suppose it was perfect casting. Irrepeatable, unrepeatable, irreplaceable.
They went over to Shea Stadium and I really did feel a sense of love because I knew then there's no way that they'd come back on the Cavern.
I mean, other people like Presley were gods. The Beatles weren't. That's why the kids couldn't understand why they couldn't rush the stage and be there with them. They just didn't realise that you couldn't have 56,000 people in Ford talking to each other.
Yeah, like they were there, and all the other groups were there. That was it, really.
America, of course, the arrival to start the tour followed headlines in American magazines that John Lennon had said the Beatles are bigger than Jesus now. And this was something that, taken out of context, appalled particularly the sort of southern states, the Bible Belt of America. John Lennon had really been saying something factual rather than giving a sort of big-headed boasting opinion about we're bigger than Jesus now. It wasn't that at all. What he was saying was the honest fact of the matter, that in today's society of 1966, more people came along to see the Beatles in concert than went along to one of Jesus's concerts on a Sunday morning in a church, as it were. That was the point he was trying to make. Eventually, when we did reach the southern states in that final tour, there was one concert that sticks out in my mind where suddenly somebody in the audience let off a firework, let off a firecracker, and the other three Beatles and a number of aides, such as myself at the side of the stage, we all swung our heads round simultaneously to face John Lennon because all of us thought that he was going to go down there with a bullet in him. And it wouldn't have surprised us all that greatly. That's the point. There was that danger of assassination all the time, but in John Lennon's case, you know, it was 14 years premature.